TCU offense dropped 35 points on Colorado, but I still find myself wanting more from the offense. Oh, yeah, it's locked on Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics. Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, everydayers, for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. We're going to wrap up with two segments on PFF grades. First, we'll look at Josh Hoover's grades in segment 2, and we'll close out today's episode by taking a look at the 3 stars on each level of the TCU defense. But this kicks off with the game versus Colorado being overall confusing because I'm going to tell you this. It's very difficult to be bad and score 35 points. It's a very difficult thing to do, and I don't think TCU accomplished it. So when I start speaking about TCU, please do not think that I am calling them bad. I'm not. Bad is such a wide brush. As I paint this picture, I'm going with some more thin brushes because when you just say bad, it's just like it covers everything. None of the nuance is heard. None of the criticism is heard. I'm not painting the picture of a bad offense because it's very difficult to be bad and score 35 points. I'm going to paint the picture of an offense that in my opinion, was a tad bit lackluster. I'm going to paint an offensive picture of dissatisfaction, of still desiring more. Because walking out of TCU versus Colorado, that's how I felt about the offense. Deion Sanders had the ability to step on that podium, and I guess you can say whatever you want to say, and I don't agree with his point. But the fact that he could even say that he was the better team or that they were the better team, to me, that's a sign of the offense not playing the way that they're supposed to. So please allow the criticism and tell me if you feel differently, of course. But the way that I walk out of Saturday's game is I can't help but want more from them. I can't help but feel like TCU's offense had more in the tank than what they gave me. Yet they still scored 35 points. After the post-game show, I was at Dave & Buster's watching UFC 320. Story time. I was at Dave & Buster's watching UFC 320 with a friend of mine. And I'm looking at the TV. I'm waiting for the main event to start. And what comes across the ticker is Josh Hoover accounts for 5 touchdowns as TCU beats Deion Sanders, Colorado. I think that's exactly what was said. And I actually forgot that TCU scored 5 touchdowns. I forgot that Hoover accounted for 5 touchdowns. That actually slipped my mind because I'm not going to sit here and act like I loved what I saw. For the majority of the game, until you get to a 21-point fourth quarter, I walked away feeling like, this offense just ain't got it tonight. Tonight. I want to stress these key words. They don't have it tonight. That's how I felt. And I can't go the majority of the game feeling that way. And because you have a strong closeout, all of a sudden change my tune. That's not how I feel. What I feel like is the way you performed throughout that game was a continuation of how you looked towards the end of the Arizona State game. I feel like there was walls that you hit throughout. But this game in particular, it felt like the offense really never got going until the very end. I'm going to look at the positive and the negative sides of this because I think both are equally important. You know, they always say, do you want the good or the bad first? And I tend to be the person who wants the bad first so I can leave walking away with the positive. So if you are a person like me, you'll be satisfied with how we structure today's episode because we're going to start off with the negativity, and that is the lackluster aspect. Why is it that I believe that TCU's offense, despite putting up 35 points, feels lackluster? And this is just me. Maybe you don't feel that way. Maybe you don't feel lackluster from them. To me, it just was disjointed. It was out of sorts. It just, there's a couple of reasons though. Number one, the biggest thing working against TCU's offense is how they started the season and the standard that they set in the first two games. Against North Carolina versus Abilene Christian, they were juggernauts. They looked absolutely unstoppable. And I understand you may say, well, that's your fault for expecting them to look that way every single week. I don't expect that from them. But what I will say is they have the talent, whether at wide receiver, whether at tight end, whether at running back, whether at quarterback. They have the talent for them to be a consistently explosive offense. And in my opinion, over the last 10 or so quarters, TCU has not lived up to that. Of course, you're going to have your stumbles. Of course, you're going to have your slips. I'm not asking for perfection. That was a very nice aspect of the starting offense against Abilene Christian. It is an unrealistic expectation for them to have that happen again. It is absolutely unrealistic for me to expect a 6-for-6 drive in any other game, right? Like 6 drives, 6 touchdowns. That's just unrealistic for me to really expect that to happen. It just isn't, right? Like I'm realistic about that. If they get 6 drives, they may get 3 or 4 touchdowns, and that's a great output in my opinion. My problem comes when I say that TCU isn't playing winning football. And some may say a win is a win. I think somebody in the comments did say a win is a win. I think somebody did. I saw that interaction between a couple of viewers. And I mean, obviously, you know what side I'm on because I said it in that show. But when I think about TCU's offense and how it needs to look, having performances like you had against Colorado will test you or will cost you against better teams. How can I say that? Because I watched a week ago. The reason I can say TCU being disjointed will cost you against better teams is because when you played a better team a week prior against Arizona State, you lost. So when I see some of those same things, some of those same habits, I do get a little bit concerned. TCU scored 35 points. It's very difficult to be bad and score 35 points. So no, TCU was not bad. However, they did show some of those same habits that cost them versus Arizona State. They did show an inability to run the football, which I think is the second biggest reason on why that offense does not feel right. I know the stats, the numbers, I get all of that, but it doesn't feel right because you are struggling to do one side of the game. You're struggling to run the football. So now when you can't run the football, it's very difficult for a one-dimensional offense to feel great. It just is. And that's what they've been over the last couple of weeks. They have not been able to run the football, which puts all of the pressure on the shoulders of Josh Hoover. And that makes plays like the missed corner route to Manjack, the missed crosser, I think that was also the Manjack. It makes those type of plays feel larger because it feels like everything that TCU offense needs to do must be done through the air. So when you miss a play where you feel like the receiver was a little bit open, it feels more drastic because don't you know you're the only thing we got going offensively? Our offensive line is struggling to block. Our 2 tackles were the worst graded players on PFF. We can't really run the football. We don't have good blocking there. Like don't you understand that passing the ball is the only thing that we really have going? How dare you miss this crosser? How dare you miss this corner route? How dare you do this? Because the pressure and the stakes are always high when Josh Hoover touches the ball. It's always high. We're in a close matchup. How dare you do that? How dare you fumble? How dare you everything. There's no mistake, though the interception and the fumble against Arizona State were huge mistakes, in my opinion. Huge mistakes. But everything feels dire. Everything feels like those last-second turnovers. You missed that, especially in a game like Colorado where points were at a premium. So I think the combination of how you started, and the talent exists. Let's be very clear. The way they started is not a trick. I think that TCU has the talent to be an explosive offense. I think TCU has the talent to be a consistent offense. And we saw it in the very first, the first 2 quarters or so against SMU. We saw it in the beginning against Arizona State. You see it in spurts. You saw it in the 4th quarter versus Colorado. I think my problem is you're not putting it together for 4 quarters. And 4 quarters does not mean going 6 for 6 like you did against Abilene Christian. It just means more consistency. It just means things not feeling so difficult. It was a very rough game for me. in my opinion, for TCU. I really didn't feel like the offense ever found a true rhythm until the end of the game. Now, one thing that's positive, because I told you we're going to start with the negative and end with the positive. You didn't play a great game. You scored 35 points. And that's very similar to how I felt about the SMU game, where you hit a wall. Now, that was in comparison to what you did the first two games. That is a good game, in my opinion, offensively. That is a good offensive game for TCU, because I think just the third quarter was a little rough. And maybe you want to clean that up, of course. But I just thought the third quarter was rough. I thought that for the most part, you played well, though. The positive thing is you still have players like Josh Hoover and Eric McAllister who, when a play needs to be made, they can make that play. The thing about TCU is I get frustrated that they're not as consistent. But what I won't do is question the talent. I think that Hoover's talented, McAllister's talented. I'm waiting for Jordan Dwyer to have another game like, his earlier matchups. Manjack is woo. Manjack had a one-handed catch with no gloves. That hits different. All right. I think Barnes and Battle and Payne, I think like those are talented backs. They have talent to be a good offense. And at any moment, it could click. At any moment it could pop. My only problem, my only apprehension is the fact that sometimes it feels like it's just not there. And the fact that I can say both of those things is what has me so conflicted, has me so confused. I will not paint with the brush of bad. I think that's a terrible adjective to use. I think it's too wide. I don't think it's completely accurate. But what I will say is they were lackluster. I think that they still left meat on the bone. And I thought that, honestly, there was a lot more they could have gave offensively. But the struggles to run the football are going to hold them back until they get it done, until indefinitely, right? Like, you struggle to run the football, you struggle to block, you're not going to be a strong offense as often as your talent should make you. Let's move forward. That's the good and the bad. I hope that you take that. We don't have no ugly for you today. No ugly for you. Hopefully I ain't the ugly. Anyway, let's push forward and start looking at some PFF grades, because we touched on Josh Hoover just a little bit, but let's really grade him by what PFF says he did as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Peloton, and Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move. Whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors, this is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs and with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the IQ system for Peloton offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps and suggests the right weights, corrects your form, and makes every rep safer and smarter. I'm sorry, I don't know who's competing with that, but if my bench press is a little bit slanted or my moves are a little bit off and they correct it, I need it. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out the Big 12 Squad Show on Thursdays, and also checking out Locked On Big 12 every other day of the week. Offensive PFF grades, and I think some of this may surprise you, because I think there was a lot of love for what Josh Hoover was able to do. I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler. He's not in the top 3. He's not in the top 5. And it doesn't seem like PFF truly loved what Hoover put out on the field. The top 3, technically Major Everhart is 1, but he only played 13 snaps. And that's just not a good threshold for me. But you have DJ Rogers at an 81.3. You have Joseph Manjack at a 71.2. So you see the gap there. Manjack 71.2. Trent Battle also didn't reach my threshold of 20 snaps, but he's a running back who was graded well. And I thought that was interesting on a day in which you did not run the football very well. But he had a 68.8. But Chase Curtis, 67.1. There's no Hoover in his top 3. There isn't. And I went to go see if that was the first time this was the case, because I just couldn't remember. And I do so many PFF grades on a weekly basis, right? Like, this is 10 PFF grades, 3 positives, 2 negatives. So I couldn't be sure on whether or not that this was the first time that Hoover has not been in the top three. What I do remember is him having a 70 last week, and now he's in the 50s, I think 59 point something. That's a drop. That's a dip. And that was interesting because I wasn't sure when PFF solidified their grades, but whatever happened, they changed it. And we talked about this on Arizona State. I talked about how they looked at his 7 big time throws. Let's actually look to see if he still has 7 big time throws, because maybe he doesn't have those. And that changed. But he had 7 big time throws in that game. And that to me was incredible. I'm like, man, I didn't realize he had 7 of those things. But all right, here goes he doesn't have 7 anymore, but he has 6. So that's still pretty good. It's still pretty good. But yeah, all in all, that was still graded as his worst game, which was not the case prior. That was not the case prior. So that's just a little bit interesting to me how they changed this. In this game, I think they go with the feel. And I wasn't sure because if you go to Hoover's raw stats, his raw stats have 23 for 33. I think that's about 69%. 275 yards, 4 touchdowns on the day. He even punched it in on another touchdown run. By the way, Trent Battle had 6 carries for 16 yards, in case you was curious on what his distribution was. But I think that how Hoover's day felt is not the same as what he put on a stat sheet. And I think that difference is represented in PFF, which I didn't think it would be because it's a metric for statistics. But yeah, it did not favor him. It favored more the eye test, and I thought it leaned that way. I would really like to know how you graded Hoover. In my opinion, I graded him a B. I didn't think that he was bad. I thought he missed a couple of throws that could have changed some things, but I thought that he was a solid quarterback. I thought that he limited the mistakes. The things that were really frustrating from a week ago weren't as present. So I thought that overall this was a good game for Hoover. I thought it was a solid game for Hoover. But PFF, they gave him a what they give him? They gave him a 66.8, which is better than what he did last week. It's better than what he had against SMU. But I felt like he had a better game against SMU, to be honest. As a passer, he did. So let me say that. As a passer, he did have a better grade. But they gave him a much better run grade against Colorado. They gave him a 69.4 as opposed to a 55.6, which I thought Hoover was a much better runner in that game as well. As a passer, pure passer, they said SMU was a better passing game than Colorado, and I would agree with that. But yes, Hoover wasn't graded that well. He hit McAllister on a clutch throw. Hit McAllister on another beautiful dime. Like he has some dots in here. Like he has some absolute dots in this game. Just I thought he was a little bit better than what they graded him, to be honest. But I thought that he was a B to B plus in my grading book, and I don't have any numbers. Excuse me. But you look at the tight ends. DJ Rogers, 81.3. And you have Chase Curtis, the 67.1. I thought that the tight ends were a quiet star in this game. I thought that Rogers and Curtis need to get more love for just how talented they were. If I'm not mistaken, another tight end caught a touchdown pass. So, but Rogers is super talented. I love when he has the ball in his hands. I think that he's really good in his run after catch situations. I think that Chase Curtis, quiet as kept, has some solid moments. I think this is the second week in a row where he had a good good catch. But let's see. Last week he had 1 catch for 21 yards. I remember that, the 1 catch he had. This week he had 2 for 38 and along the 27. He's had some solid moments. I think that he doesn't get a lot of shine, but he has had some solid moments as a pass catcher. And Manjack is just Manjack at this point. Manjack is very consistent. Manjack is going to give you what he's going to give you. He's going to be a good receiver across the middle. He's going to be good with hands. He's going to be really decisive after the catch. He's not going to be the guy who's trying to hit you with the like he's not trying to give you all of these different eye candy moves. He's trying to get north and south. He's trying to get as many yards as he can. I really do like Manjack's game. Everything about him screams no gloves, to be honest. Uh, just how he handles his business, he goes straight ahead with it. But yeah, the worst. Ben Taylor Whitfield at right tackle, Quentin Harris at left tackle, and there was a couple of players who had worse grades. Strickland had 20 snaps, which is typically my threshold. I typically like to go 20 snaps. There was about 71 on offense. So you play 20, that's almost a third of the snaps. So at that point, I begin to feel like I can put you into the grading. But Strickland had 20 snaps at right guard, and that's the highest of anybody who was underneath Taylor Whitfield and Harris. Taylor Whitfield had 53.3. Harris had a 53.7. I just didn't think that the edges were good. I thought that the offensive line in general struggled. Excuse me, but I thought that the outside, the exterior of that line struggled more than others. Um, it was just rough, especially at right tackle, where Quentin Harris or Ben Taylor Whitfield that came in. All in all, I just felt like there was. Yeah, no. I don't know how to put it into words, but when the right tackle went down, you just kept feeling like, all right, Hoover's never going to be comfortable. No matter what, Hoover is never going to be comfortable. And that is reflected in these grades. So let's push forward and close out, because the defensive grades is something I want to take a look at. We're not going to go too deep into the defense, but there were stars on each level of the unit. And we'll take a look at that as we continue and close out today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Square, and your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that just make the neighborhood. These are places that become an extension of your home, whether it's a sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base. So every single Sunday, every single Saturday, you are there, whether you're a Cowboys fan, whether you are a TCU fan, whether you are a Mavs fan, and you're there just throughout the week. You know that local sports bar that always has your DFW teams on. Shout out to the Rangers playing in Arlington. But these are the businesses that you love, a local spot in the neighborhood that's just been a heart of the community for years. Type of place you walk in, everybody knows everybody. And if you don't know anybody, now all of a sudden you know everybody. Love that. So Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. And FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm going to tell you right now, I am stunned that they are still giving you $300 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I'm stunned. I just didn't think that this would be something that continued this long, but yet and still here we are. TCU has the sixth best odds to win the Big 12 on FanDuel. They're the sixth best odds. They're behind Cincinnati now. Texas Tech, I think Utah is still in there somewhere. But they come in outside of the top five. Josh Hoover has plus 8,000 odds for the Heisman. TCU has plus 1,500 odds for the Big 12. So these are just a couple of things you can put some money down on that will pay off later, or you can put some money on this upcoming game on Saturday versus K-State. It's all on you. Just make sure you go to FanDuel, make every moment more, make a little cash on a sport that you know and love. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Let's go into these defense. Let's pivot over to the defensive side of the football, because there were some stars on every single level. You had Zach Chapman on the defensive line. He had a 75.7 grade. Channing Canada on the defensive secondary. He had a 74.4 grade. And then Namdi Obiazor, he had a 71.4. And you look at Paul Oyewale right behind him, 71.3. And then you have Caleb Elarmzor bringing up the end of that top 5 with a 70.2. This linebacker room is pretty good, guys. Be honest with you. Max Carroll, once again, didn't get a lot of snaps, but 6th player on the list. He's still a player who is making a noticeable impact. And you look at Elarmzor, 90.5 run defense. And I saw a couple of plays where he was stuffing the hole. I saw a couple of plays where he was filling and absolutely disrupting plays. He's credited with 6 stops. You look at Obiazor, 5 stops. So in between your 2 top linebackers, you have 11 stops. And a stop by PFF is regarded as, let's make sure I get their exact definition, because I know what a stop is to me, but let's get exactly what they're calling it. A stop is a tackle that constitutes as a failure for the offense. So what you're looking at is a player with a 95.5 run defense in Caleb Alarms, or 83.1 tackling grade. His coverage wasn't looked at that highly. His pressure wasn't looked at that highly. One thing I'll say about PFF when it comes to linebackers is it's difficult if you blitz quite a bit, because you're not going to get home all the time, and that's going to affect your pass rush grade. Namdi, who found himself in the top 3 that we typically talk about, you saw him have a really good pressure rate, though, or pressure grade. He had a 78.1. And as you look, he had 1 total pressure. He had 1 sack, though. So that's one thing that you can account for. He had a sack. And 59.1 in coverage. Solid coverage. I think it was kind of disrupted by the fact that he thought he made a play on the ball, ended up being a 17-yard reception. But let's get to the final. Let's get to the closer. Let's get to the guys who weren't necessarily doing that well on Saturday's game. And that's Jamel Johnson. Zach Chapman. I didn't really get to Chapman or Canada. Canada had 2 stops on the day, so you see a strong tackling grade. You see a strong run defense from your cornerback. And you look at targets, 1 target, no receptions. No receptions. Yeah, 74.2 coverage grade. He was really solid. Good day by him. Zach Chapman, he had a couple of pressures. He had a couple of hurries specifically. A couple stops. Just all around good day. Good run defense, good tackling, good pressure. You saw positives from him in every single aspect, and that's why he led the team in PFF grades. But now let's close out and go to Jamel Johnson, who I thought was very difficult to grade, because Jamel Johnson did some really good things in the beginning. I thought that Tristan Johnson did as well. Tristan Johnson finds himself in the top 10, but not super high on the list. Jamel Johnson had a strong-ish first half where he was involved in some bad plays, but he had a big play himself with an interception. He had a forced interception. We don't talk about that often, but Namdi Obiazor's interception came from a tip from Jamel Johnson. So it felt like he did things that were good, but at the same time, he was targeted 8 times, allowed 6 catches. Like that is an issue. So when his coverage grade is a 42.2, I get it. And that's the thing that brings him down. His run defense, 70.6, solid. His tackling, 73.1, solid. His pressure, 60 even. Who really cares about his pressure? I guess it brings down his grade a little bit, but the 42.2 is really the issue here. And that's the player. I'm not even going to go into another one because we did more positives, but yeah, this will be interesting. Tomorrow, I don't know what we're going to talk about tomorrow. It'll be TCU related, I can tell you that. I can't think about what we're going to talk about tomorrow. I haven't planned that out yet. But in the meantime, in between time, I thought I did. Maybe I'm just having a brain fart. But in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.